Let me introduce you to the Altea region, a brand new Pokemon Fakemon region based on the lost city of Atlantis. Now this region also has lots of other inspirations from mythologies all around the world. Now this region is created by Pierrickachu, who I'm going to link their Instagram down in the description below to go and check them out. Our two main games are Pokemon Heights and Pokemon Depths, and our professor is Elder Lycan. Now this region also has a lot of Greek inspirations, and our two main characters definitely look very Greek inspired. You can choose from either Onerus or from Selena. Now let's jump straight in and choose our starter Pokemon. Our grass type starter is Sproutail, and it's actually based on the Phoenix, so having a grass type Phoenix Pokemon I think is really interesting. Now this Pokemon is known to camouflage within the forest, and we can see we've got our shiny version here as well, which I think also helps with that storyline to camouflage in the forest. It evolves into Foliagion, which is now a grass and flying type Pokemon. It's definitely getting a lot larger, but I love that it still keeps that camouflagey coloring. And then lastly evolves into Phoenix, so you can see it's kind of got Phoenix within the name there as well, looking much larger now. And I love how it's kind of got like those vine whips coming out from its tail as well. Almost gives us inklings of Bulbasaur, I think. Our fire type starter is called Ember, and it merges as a bear but with an Oni from Japanese culture as well, which is kind of like a troll or a demon yokai. Now while it does kind of look angry and fierce, it does have a very caring and protective nature for its trainer as well. It evolves into Furnace, which I think is a great name to merge a furnace and fur together. I love that big fiery mane around its head, and even the little teeth coming through as well is quite nice. It's actually become a fire and normal type Pokemon now as well. But that typing changes again when it evolves into Urson, which is now a fire and dark type Pokemon. That fiery mane has gotten much larger now, but even that dark fur around the head, and it looks like it's got a very angry deposition, so I can see why it's changed to a dark type. And then our water type starter is called Kitide, and it merges a cat with a mermaid as well. And we can see the fins coming off the legs and the tail for that Pokemon as well now. Now, although cats traditionally don't like water, this one has webbed paws, which make it really good for swimming. It evolves into Pierrickachu, so it's got like Barracuda in the name, which I think is quite cool. That tail has grown out to definitely look a bit more like a mermaid tail now. And it's got a big, long dorsal fin on the top of its head, which is interesting that it's orange because it's very different to the rest of the coloring. That is also a water and normal type Pokemon now. And then its final evolution is Meowmaid, so fully grown out into a mermaid now. It is a water and fairy type, which I think matches that quite well. The fins on the legs, it's got a big dorsal fin, but also fins along its back and spine as well, with of course that really long mermaid tail. I think I'm going to choose the fire type starter, but let me know down in the comments which ones you're going to pick. Now, a quick message for the boys out there before we get into the Route 1 Pokemon.
I always think that what guys are looking for is a cute girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. But all my boys out there, we all know that what we're really looking for is Atlantis, an ancient city filled with treasure, thought to be lost at sea by Poseidon.
Going into the Route 1 Bug now, we have Froakie, the Ice and Bug type Pokemon. Now, this line is actually based on Frosty the Snowman, but Frosty kind of has a different demeanor in this line. It evolves into Snowcoon, so that traditional cocoon kind of Pokemon for a Route 1 Bug. And then lastly evolves into Frostlin. I absolutely love this design. We've got our snowman look here with the carrot for the nose, and we can see all the icicles over it as well. I love that it's dripping ice from the nose as well, but it definitely has a bit of an angry look there. Those eyes definitely don't look friendly like Frosty the Snowman, which I think is a really cool look for it. Babinobi is a pure rock type Pokemon. This is based on Japanese Zen gardens, but as we're going to see in its evolution, it's also based on ninjas as well, as it evolves into Stone Ninja, which is now a rock and fighting type Pokemon. Definitely very Japanese inspired. Even those little daggers that's holding as well look really nice. Our secondary Route 1 Bug is called Mignat, which is a steel and bug type Pokemon. This is based on a gnat. I love the giant eyes that it has, look very cute. Evolves into Medhull, so again, our cocoon kind of Pokemon for our Route 1 Bug. But I absolutely love its final evolution in Gigant, so merging Gigantic and Ant together. This thing looks like an absolute monster. Those giant shield-like arms, but even like the little mandibles that it's got, and even claws, like the little legs on the front of its body look like little claws. I think this Pokemon looks really nice. Waxplorer is a normally ground type Pokemon. He's kind of like that Route 1 rodent that we have, and I think this looks adorable. Definitely looks a lot like a mouse, but it's also based on a kobold from World of Warcraft, which has that kind of candle look on the top of its head. But I absolutely love its evolution in Waxcavator, which now a dark and ground type. It definitely looks like it's merged Cubone with maybe a Rattata there, that skull look over its face, but even along the spine. And because it is an excavator, having a little pickaxe made of bones, I think looks really interesting as well. Snakruka is a normal and poison type Pokemon. I think having the disguise on the tail there is a really interesting look, but something really interesting in this one, but also in its evolution as well, if you look carefully, it has a bit of a bow tie kind of look. So definitely disguised kind of Pokemon. So merging a lot of really cool inspirations there. And then evolves into Scamneconda, which is now normal and poison type Pokemon. Absolutely loving the design of having like a dummy like snake tail there, where other Pokemon might think that that's its head, but we can see its head there is the one that's lying on the ground. Really, really love the design here. I think the artist has done a fantastic job bringing this to life. Badgergeist is a normal and ghost type Pokemon, and I think this Pokemon is way too cute to be inspired by a poltergeist. It has got a really big spectral clouded element around the shoulders and the neck there, but the badger side of it just looks adorable. Its evolution is Umbra-coon, so now I'm also based on a raccoon rather than a badger, and you can see that a spectral flame almost coming off the shoulders and the back is giant. Now, Root 1 bird is Hatchok, which is a flying and electric type Pokemon. I love the black coloring over this bird, as well as the yellow coloring for the electricity as well. But the bright blue eyes definitely stand out. It evolves into Voltorb, who has a massive like mohawk on the top of its head. I wonder if it's kind of like a lightning rod as well. And then lastly evolves into Tersalek. Now this line is kind of based on the Thunderbird from Native American mythology as well. And I think the whole concept of this Pokemon, and with the design like the lightning bolt tail, definitely makes it look very speedy and a very interesting Pokemon, I think. Then next we have Skarmory, which is a pure ghost type Pokemon. Now this line are based off Scarecrows, but it's also inspired kind of like Mimikyu as well. We have the Scarecrow head of the Pokemon, but the actual Pokemon itself is hidden underneath that hood. It evolves into Mortar, so getting much larger now. We can see the eye of the actual Pokemon there, not the actual Scarecrow head itself. And the giant mouth and giant tongue that it has is really cool. And then its last evolution is Morify. So again, we've got a very spooky kind of Scarecrow head on the top there. It definitely has a very creepy exterior, but a very kind of silly, jovial interior, which is cool. Then next is Sandino, which is a pure ground type Pokemon. And it kind of looks like a Cubone mixed up with a Sandshrew. Like it's got the skull over the face, but I think underneath that Sandshrew kind of look is definitely there. Evolves into Ground Dino. So now it's got some massive horns on its head as well. Almost kind of looks like the pyramids, I think, with the shape of its head there and the coloring. And then lastly evolves into Fortressaurus, which is looking like an absolute beast. It looks like it's inspired by the Ankylosaurus with that massive tail, but obviously some artillery in the front of its head there as well, which is really interesting. Those horns are massive, but obviously has that huge cannon in the top of its head. Then next we have Skitsum, which is a normal and dark type Pokemon. And this Pokemon likes to prowl around at night, but its bright red eyes kind of give its spot away when it's trying to hide. It evolves into a Freyline, which has now become an electric and dark type Pokemon, which I could kind of see was hinted in the first evolution there, but obviously we've got a lot of yellow coloring and some lightning bolt designs on this Pokemon. And then lastly evolves into Pantera. Now this Pokemon is very rare to find, so it's kind of like the feline version of Arcanine, and we can definitely see the large body shape that it has kind of matches Arcanine, I feel, a little bit. Then next we're going into 4 different fish, which are all based on different seasons, but they're all kind of following that line of Magikarp and Phoebus being very, very weak, and then they evolve into something very, very strong. So the first one is Gyaranda, which is a pure water type, which definitely looks a lot like a Magikarp. And that evolves into Sekura, which is a water and fairy type Pokemon. This Pokemon looks very elegant and very beautiful, and I think the cherry blossom design over the tail and the neck and the fins coming off look really, really nice. Then next we have Demiking, which is based off the Demikin fish, a similar design to what we just saw, but then it evolves into Momajira. So this is now looking like it has a bit of an angry deposition, maybe a bit more like Gyarados, whereas before it's definitely a little bit more like Milotic. This is a water and fire type Pokemon, which looks really interesting. Has like a giant autumn leaf kind of look on the tail there. Then next we have our Altean Magikarp, which doesn't look too dissimilar from our regular Magikarp. I feel the Altean Gyarados does look quite different though. It's definitely got that long serpentine body like Gyarados does, and it doesn't look as aggressive as Gyarados. This is a water and grass type, which I think is very interesting. And we can see those bright green leaves on the tail, but also on the parts on the head as well, which is cool. And then of course our Altean Phoebus, which looks very icy actually. It's just a pure water type, but it looks like it's got ice all over its body. Evolving into Altean Milotic, which is definitely our winter vibe here. Lots of icicles and that snowflake on its tail look really, really nice. Spikeleon is a pure grass type Pokemon. It looks like it's got a cactus for a tail, which is really cute. It's got those big needle-like arms though, which is really interesting. It looks like it would be a poison type, especially those purpley pinky colors on the end of those needle-like arms. It evolves into Cactillion, so now merging like a reptile with the cactus. We can see the cactus on tail is getting much larger now. And it didn't become poison, it became a grouse and dragon type when it evolves into Dracocactus. Now this is based on Kukulkan from Mayan mythology, which is kind of like a giant feathered serpent. We can see see that cactus tail is giant now with really large spikes all over it, and we can see those massive spikes on the arm as well. This definitely looks like a very dangerous Pokemon, but I love the design here. Next, I think Dogus is very cute. It is a pure psychic type Pokemon, and we can see that third eye in the middle of its head there, but it does look like a very cute dog. Evolving into Porcus, so definitely following that kind of witch line now, that massive witch's hat, and we can see the third eye has moved from its forehead down to its chest, which is quite interesting. And then its last evolution in Barkinist is now a psychic and dark type Pokemon, so that third eye has moved again now to the top of that witch's hat, but the actual dog itself is looking a lot more dangerous with those large claws that it's got, but definitely looking very furry as well. Then there's a very different vibe to that. We have Floravine, which is a pure grass type Pokemon. Now, this is based off the Greek nature nymphs in Greek mythology. And I think the pinks in this Pokemon definitely have that nymph kind of vibe. Evolving into Florabloom, which definitely looks a lot like a Roserade, I think. I think it's kind of the stance and the giant flower that it has on its head. And then its final evolution is Floraskion, which is a grass and fairy type Pokemon. Now, I think we could all see the fairy type coming through. The pinks have covered a lot of the Pokemon now. We can see those large pink wings, and we can see the pink along the arms. It definitely looks like it's wearing a dress now as well. Next is Satiny, which is based off a cetacean, and it is a pure ice type Pokemon. This is looking really cool already. Evolving into Beluga, so it has Beluga from a beluga whale in the name there. Interesting how we have like a quadrupedal kind of whale Pokemon, but we can see those front arms are like flippers. But then I absolutely love its final evolution is Setasama. This is now an ice and fighting type Pokemon and combines the cetacean but with a sumo as well. We can see the undergarments that it's got around its waist definitely look a lot like a sumo, and its large bulky size definitely comes together really, really well for this design. Torshai is next, which is a pure fire type Pokemon, obviously based on a flame torch. It looks like it's got little hands poking out from the wrappings there, which looks very cute. Then next is Flamind, which is now a fire and psychic type Pokemon. A bit of a different vibe here. Still looks like that flaming torch, but having that crown around its head and knowing that it's the psychic type as well, quite a different look to the pre-evolution. But its final evolution in Furlex is really interesting. Definitely looks more like a giant totem now with flame arms coming out, and knowing that we're combining Inferno and Intellect together definitely changes the vibe for this Pokemon. I like this one a lot. I absolutely love the shiny for this as well, so I wanted to show that off. But we can see here that they're very dangerous and very aggressive Pokemon. Then next we have Fakeclips, which is a pure fairy type Pokemon, which looks very, very cute. Now this Pokemon actually has a split evolution, which you might be able to tell from the blue and the red gem that it has on the end of its ears here. So the first evolution is Excalibur, which is a steel and fairy type Pokemon. Now this line based on King Arthur and the Excalibur sword, as we can see in the name there as well, and also with the steel typing. Now this Pokemon looks very royal and very elegant. As we can see, it is born from the very essence of light and represents everything that is best about Altea. And then the opposite to that is the other split evolution, which is Noctaliber, which is now a steel and ghost type Pokemon. And is the opposite, so is now born from the very essence of darkness and represents everything that is most vile on Altea. Then next we have Entominus, which is a pure bug type Pokemon. It almost looks like a little crab. I think it's the legs and almost like those larger hands at the front, almost kind of look like pincers. Now this line is based on Praying Mantis, which we'll definitely see that evolves, but it's also based on Cell from Dragon Ball Z. And I think the coloring already kind of shows a bit of a Cell look here. Evolves into Larvagon. So like everyone bugs, we've kind of got our cocoon kinds of Pokemon here. And then evolves into Wormantis, which is now a dragon and bug type Pokemon. Definitely looking a lot like a praying mantis here with the stance and the massive arms that it's got, but the coloring coming from Cell. Really cool design here. And I absolutely love the red spikes along the back as well. I think the red really shines out compared to the rest of the coloring on the Pokemon here. Then next we have Calcifer, which is a fire and fighting type Pokemon. And now this Pokemon line is almost like the opposite of Greninja. And I think so far I prefer Calcifer over Froakie. So I think that Asian style hat with a little flame on the top is very cute. It evolves into Ignatoad, so definitely looking like it's getting a little bit more attitude now with that stance. That giant black pearl on its chest is kind of an interesting look though. And then its final evolution is Amphiblaze. So we can see it's definitely got some darker elements now with the fists and the pearls around its neck, and even its eyes giving a bit of a black coloring there as well is interesting. Now this line also based on Ronins, which are samurais that have no lord or master, so a very solitary kind of design for this Pokemon, I think. Now Embrace is a fire and flying type Pokemon, and this is also based on the Phoenix. We saw the grass kind of Phoenix for the starter Pokemon, but this is following the traditional route of a fire Phoenix now. Evolves into Blazefur, which is very interesting. It's got a very large head there. Definitely looks kind of angry as well, but the kind of flame look for the tip of their head looks quite nice. I absolutely love its final evolution in Incineraptor though. Definitely looking like a bird of prey, that giant hook beak that it has. And I think the coloring throughout this Pokemon is really cool too. Now going into some Altean regional Pokemon. First is Altean Abra, which is a pure electric type Pokemon, which looks nothing like an Abra. I feel this is a completely different vibe for our Abra here, but we're going to see it looks a little bit more like the line as it evolves. evolving into Catawat, which is electric and psychic type Pokemon, and we can see it's holding magnets now, which kind of give it its electric typing. Instead of the spoons, it's holding the magnets. And that's last evolution in Alakazam. Similar to Alakazam, instead of the spoons floating around, it's now got those giant magnets. This whole design looks really interesting. I also love that giant beard that it has. I think that works really well. Next, going into some Aldean Kanto starter Pokemon, and I think the Bulbasaur line is one of my favorites. I absolutely love this look. Altean Bulbasaur, pure ghost type Pokemon. Got that purple look over its entire body. Instead of that bulb on the back, having that skeleton and that spectral light blue greeny kind of flame is really, really nice. Instead of Ivysaur, it has a new evolution in Marosaur. Definitely following that same vibe, but instead of the bulb on the back getting larger, that skeleton is getting much larger. It is ghost and poison type. But I absolutely love Ectosaur. I think this design is amazing. That kind of rib cage bony look on the back has now become an entire skeleton, and that skull is like a Duskull skull. So the flame is kind of like the Duskull eye, and I just think this Pokemon looks phenomenal. I absolutely love this one. And Altean Charmander is the complete opposite because it's now an ice type, and we can see instead of the flame on the tail, it's got a big ice shard instead. Instead of Charmeleon, we have Frostallion, which is now an ice and dragon type Pokemon. Body shape is definitely a lot like a Charmeleon, but still got that ice on the tail, but even a large ice spike on its back as well. And then lastly, Charizard. So obviously has Blizzard in its name. Ice and dragon type Pokemon, and looking really, really cool as a frost dragon design. It's only little, but I love that little ice spike on its nose as well. And then lastly, Altean Squirtle is a pure steel type Pokemon. Definitely looks like it's covered in a suit of armor here. It's got like a helmet over its head as well. It evolves into Gladiatorta, which is now a steel and fighting type Pokemon, obviously based on a gladiator. We can see it's got a spear and a shield for its two arms there. But I think Nighthorse is very cool. It looks like it's got some hon edge on its back. I love that the helmet looks like it's Greek inspired with like a Spartan helmet look on its face. Now there's still a lot more to come in this region, including the gimmick of the region, which is Proto Evolution. We've got evolutions, we've got fossils, we've got legendaries. So let me know down in the comments if you want a part 2 for the region.